Hello and welcome back to the Conquer in History channel, and today we will be reviewing Overture to a New War. The second movie I think that is necessary to be watched before beginning Legend of the Galactic Heroes proper. We begin with the Secretary of State having a conversation with Prince Braunschweig, the son-in-law to the Emperor, and they are discussing Reinhardt's recent achievements in the last battle. For this, Reinhardt is going to be granted the title of Count Lohengrin, which is an ancient noble family name that has since become extinct. They see this as just further currying favor of Reinhardt's sister, who was recently made the Countess Grunwald. Reinhardt is going to visit his sister as soon as he lands. Meanwhile, in Free Planets Alliance territory, the Free Planets Alliance fleet is also returning home. Yang and Dusty land to be greeted by John Robert Lapp, a friend of Yang's and a fellow military officer who he has known since his days at the academy. Jean Robert asks Lang if it is okay to marry their mutual friend, Jessica. Jean Robert Lapp then proposes to Jessica, who also looks to Yang for approval, which he gives as he had when he spoke to Jean Robert. They then go out to a nice dinner, have some drinks, do some dancing, and have a good time in general to the music of Brahms. However, Jean Robert has a little bit too much to drink and passes out at the table, and while Jessica and Yang are dancing, Jessica begins to weep into Yang's chest. It is rather obvious that there are some deeper feelings between Yang and Jessica that all three of these people are aware of. The couple then goes home, and Yang goes to get something to drink. Now, the movie begins to cut rapidly back and forth between events that are happening in the Free Planets Alliance and on the Imperial side as well, so I'm just going to take these one at a time. In the Free Planets Alliance, we see the Yang household where the phone rings, and Julian is introduced to us. He's Yang's ward and sort of an adopted son of his. Yang has to attend a ceremony with the defense chairman. Chairman Truenhit at this ceremony asks Yang how to win the war, and Yang frankly says that you need greater numbers. Meanwhile, on the Imperial side, we see Reinhardt and Siegfried Kirchis off to see Anna Rose, Reinhardt's sister. The Secretary of State arranges for Reinhardt to lead an invasion meant to suppress the grumbles of the noble class who think that Reinhardt doesn't deserve his latest position in the court and are hopeful that he will be killed. While Reinhardt has a very pleasant lunch with his sister on his way back, he gets very upset because he sees Anne Rose's situation as concubine as equivalent to being imprisoned. He then gets his orders, while Kirchis spends most of this time taking long, lingering looks at Anne Rose, who, in fairness, does have an almost elven, graceful air around her. Prince Braunschweig, in the meanwhile, is plotting the failure of Reinhardt. The army chiefs of staff have decided to take away all of Reinhardt's subordinates that we saw in the previous film. Mittermeier is gone, as is Ruenthal, his chief of staff, and even the captain who drives his flagship. They want to see if he has some real talent without his peers. They give him 5 substitute admirals who each bring a problem to the table, be it their personalities or age. Next, we meet the third major party in the galaxy, the planet of Phazan. Phazan is technically a planet that exists within the Empire, however, it is given autonomy. The leader of Phazan decides that the Free Planets Alliance should win the next battle for the sake of balance, since the Empire won the last one. Back on Heinessen, the capital of the Free Planets Alliance, Yang and the second fleet that he is a part of, as well as Jean Robert Lapp and the 6th fleet, are called into the battle over the invasion to come. Julian and Yang have a brief argument about Julian becoming a soldier, which Yang really does not want him to do. Then over in the Empire, we see a scene between the Kaiser himself and Reinhardt. They discuss how Reinhardt has recently been made Count Lohengrin, so his name is no longer Reinhard von Musel, but Reinhard von Lohengrin. And the Kaiser says that he has actually considered offering Reinhardt a Marquis, which is a very high rank in the Empire. Reinhardt seems to play the part of being humble, saying that he's not even worthy of being a count. But the Kaiser does throw a little bit of humor and talks about the Kaiser being a higher title than even Marquis. Over in the Alliance, the fleets leave planet Heinesen and go to meet the incoming invasion. Their plan is to envelop the fleet of Reinhardt in a triangle. There is a reference to a historical battle where the exact same plan resulted in a historic victory for the Alliance. Reinhardt and Curtius have anticipated that the Alliance will execute this very plan. They meet with the admirals who want to retreat. Reinhardt sees the advantage in their position. Because they are on the inside and the Alliance fleets have divided themselves into three, they can work on interior lines, and as such, the Imperial fleet now has access to both greater mobility and greater numbers. What Reinhardt is essentially talking about here is the notion of operating on interior lines, which is a strategy that has been used in the real world in many wars over many centuries. The concept of interior lines is essentially that even if you are outnumbered, as long as you're able to keep your forces together in between greater forces than yourself, you actually have the advantage because you can move back and forth between the opposing forces who are not working together. Curtius notes that Admiral Fahrenheit, the one with white hair, is enthused about the plan, and Reinhardt places him in front of the battle line. We see here how Reinhardt and Curtius are rewarding an admiral who agrees with their ideas. Yang proposes to his own commander a more cautious plan, but it is rejected. Back home, we see Professor Jessica Edwards signing a petition to keep funding for the fine arts open. She tells the students circulating this petition to continue to fight for things that are not of use to war, and she reminisces how herself, Yang, and Jean-Robert did the same thing when they were young. Meanwhile, the Fourth Fleet in the center of the Alliance line is suddenly attacked by the Imperials, who jam their communications with the other fleets. We see the Imperial Valkyries in actions while the Fourth Fleet cannot respond in time. The attack is swift and overwhelming. Commander Peta, Yang's commander, is now much more receptive to Yang's advice, but he has an issue with abandoning the Fourth Fleet when they receive news of the attack. Here again, we see that Yang is very much a realist and is not given over to emotion in these matters. Reinhardt then pivots to his right to attack the Sixth Fleet. And it is at this moment, while Reinhardt is very excited about their prospects for victory, that Curtius just says, "I was thinking that the troops could rest." Reinhardt had not even considered how tired his own soldiers would be, but it does agree that they should rest in shifts. Here again, we see the differences in personality between Curtius and Reinhardt, with Reinhardt being much more aggressive than the more level-headed Curtius. As we cut to the Sixth Fleet, Jean-Robert is concurring with the views of Yang that uniting the fleets is the best prospect for victory with the Alliance, even though it means abandoning the Fourth. He is mocked for doubting the plans of great past commanders. So we see here that the Alliance is not even considering the situation that is at hand. They are still worshipping at the altar of tactics that were only successful a long time ago. Again, there are very many real-world parallels to this, such as European generals who would continue to worship at the altar of Napoleon for well after his time had passed. Reinhardt attacks the Sixth Fleet and is a repeat of the Fourth Fleet annihilation. Curtius suggests giving an offer of surrender, which Reinhardt calls very kind. The admiral of the Sixth Fleet rejects this offer and wildly attacks for the sake of his own pride, and the entire ship goes down with him, including our recently met Jean-Robert. As we return to the Second Fleet, Yang is at this point trying to figure out the best way to stop the mounting casualties. Dusty asks why Yang doesn't do more. In his first verbal mention of his political feelings, he says that it is the duty of soldiers to follow their orders, or they won't be soldiers of a democratic nation for long. The Imperial fleets catch up with the Second Fleet and attack it. Commander Peta is wounded, and Yang takes control of the fleet. It's at this point that Reinhardt, full of confidence, goes for the killing blow and has his fleet take a spindle formation, so essentially a football shape, to break through the center of the Alliance fleet. Yang orders the fleet to open up deliberately around the oncoming formation. Dusty raises concerns about an enemy interception of this message. However, Yang was prepared for this very situation. The spindle is a common Imperial tactic, and he had already input the instructions into the ship computers under a coded phrase. So as the Yang fleet evades the assault, Yang takes notice that Reinhardt is certainly seeming to develop as a potent commander. Reinhardt starts to revel in his victory, but suddenly he gets very agitated as he observes the battle screen. Yang has deliberately avoided the Imperial fleet and has begun to envelop them from the rear. Reinhardt realizes what's happening and sounds a swift advance as Yang has now become the hunter in this fight. Reinhardt tries to turn his fleet around to get around behind Yang, but what results is an enormous ring composed of both fleets, creating a perfect stalemate in this situation. Curtius and Reinhardt decide to withdraw, feeling secure in their victories from earlier in the battle. Reinhardt sends Yang a message swearing to beat him at their next meeting, and him and Curtius return home with the Imperial fleet, minus one of the Imperial admirals who died while disobeying Reinhardt's orders. Yang starts to search for survivors and laments that he was unable to have a better grasp of the situation before so many had died. The Fasani have been watching the entire time and note that Yang and Reinhardt could be characters of interest to keep watch of. Reinhardt's enemies on Odin are infuriated with his success, and most of the admirals who were assigned to him complain to the military chiefs, all while a certain man with red blinking eyes looks on. Mittermeier and Ruenthal raise a glass to Reinhardt's victory. Back on Hyzenopolis, Yang visits an enormous graveyard to the dead, stretching as far as the eye can see. He somberly walks to the grave of Jean-Robert, where Jessica already is, and in mourning. As we enter the credits, we see Reinhard von Lohengram receiving honors from the Kaiser and surrounded by his admirals, more powerful than ever. Yang is appointed commander to the new 13th Fleet and is given the task of capturing Isiralon Fortress, the impregnable fortress of the Empire that has held for 150 years. Can he even do it? Well, for that, you have to stay tuned for the actual show. Alright, well that was a pretty long movie. That's the longest piece of media that we're going to be reviewing here on the Conquering History channel, as far as Legend of the Galactic Heroes is concerned. But what actually happened in this movie? Well, in some respects, you can say this was the opposite of My Conquest is the Sea of Stars. In My Conquest is the Sea of Stars, we saw an Alliance fleet invade Imperial territory, and then was pushed back, and the war is a stalemate. This time, we see an Imperial fleet invade Alliance territory, and has to retreat, and ultimately, we're still at a stalemate here. So, in the grand scheme of the entire war, not much has changed. The Battle of the Astarte Star Zone is perhaps inconsequential. However, in another respect, we have seen the rise to prominence of our two main characters. Reinhardt was tested by his superiors. He had enemies who hoped he would fail, and yet he succeeded beyond anybody's imagining, purely through his own military genius. On the other side, we see Yang now officially in command of a fleet of his own, because his own commander was destroyed, as was the commanders of two other fleets. We were introduced to Jean-Robert, who was only with us for about half an hour, which should tell you right from the start that nobody's safe in this series. Anybody could die at any time, no matter how close your relationship is to the main character. We were introduced to Jessica, who will certainly play an important role moving forward due to her relationship with Yang. And of course, we were also introduced to the third party in the galaxy, Phazon. They didn't really do much, they just observed, but it's made very clear that they are going to be important later as well. So much like My Conquest is the Sea of Stars, Overture to a New War is important to watch as background for the main series. Now, speaking of the main series, the next video I put out will be the start of the actual OVA, and we'll be starting on episode 3 because Overture to a New War covers the events of episodes 1 and 2. I probably will go back at some point and do reviews on episodes 1 and 2 and discuss any scenes that are in there that did not make it to the movie, just for the sake of completeness. But there's not going to be any confusion. Episode 3 will be next, followed by 4, 5, 6, etc., etc. Now, a very important word of warning, extremely important. When you watch the main series, you must not watch the after credits previews, because this was made for people who had already read the manga, or it was assumed they had already read the manga. There are often spoilers in the credits, post-credits preview sequences. So watch the ending song if you want to, but then immediately turn it off and continue to the next episode so that you do not get spoiled. So I will see you next time, and thanks for watching the Conquering History channel, and be sure to hit the subscribe button so you can always be alerted when a new episode, review, and analysis comes out.